Guys, let's talk about World War II. Let's get some basic dates out of the way, some basic concepts and ideas before we jump into this in too much detail here. We're talking about World War II. For Europe, that's 1939 to 1945. In Asia, World War II really starts with the Japanese invasion of China in 1937. The United States itself will not get involved until December of 1941. For all intents and purposes, while traditionally people have said World War I is from 1939 to 1945, I think recent historians certainly have pushed that back to 1937, and certainly for this class, World War II is 1937 to 1945. Is World War II simply a continuation of World War I, as many people have argued, which is a 20-year break in between? And in some ways, it certainly is true. The Versailles Treaty was not friendly to Germany. Germany was under a lot of pressure politically, socially, economically after World War I. It never really fully recovered until really the rise of fascism. And that was, of course, a dubious recovery, as we'll talk about. We're going to start this off in talking about World War II, and we're going to start this off talking about Adolf Hitler. Let's talk about Hitler. Let's use him as our kind of entry into the events leading up to World War II. Hitler, first of all, wasn't born in Germany. He was born in Austria. He had many German relatives. As a young man, Adolf Hitler wanted to be an artist. He was a failed artist. He wasn't accepted in any of the art schools he applied. He, perhaps disgruntled, disillusioned by many events in his life, when World War I broke out, he joined the German army, and he had an excellent military record. He was a messenger, one of the most dangerous jobs in the German army. For long periods of time, he would do absolutely nothing, sitting back quietly and behind the lines, and then suddenly he'd be given a message, often having to ride a bicycle. He'd have to ride up to the front lines, being shot at constantly by sharpshooters on the other side, and in very dangerous situations, deliver the message, ride back, and then have downtime, very kind of schizophrenic kind of existence. He was very good at the job. His veterans, his fellow veterans, described him as being quiet and kind of different, unusual. But that may be really a misnomer here, guys. Really, when you think about it, soldiers this time when they're off duty would spend their time drinking or carousing. Adolf was known for sitting and drawing and being quiet. So that may have made him seem a bit weird. But in any case, in 1918, Hitler was gassed on the front lines, and he spent the end of the war in the hospital. When he got out of the hospital, instead of going back to Austria, he went back to Germany. He went to the German state of Bavaria, specifically the city of Munich, southern Germany. He went back with hundreds of thousands of German troops, troops that were disillusioned, angry, frustrated. They had lost the war, and for many of them, they didn't know why. There was no major battle that ended World War I. No German territory had actually been occupied. For the German army, many of them, the question was, how could we lose this war? Well, the events, of course, that led up to Germany's suing for peace was really about Germany seeing that the war was lost once the United States got involved, and trying to create a peace based on Wilson's 14 points that would at least let them get out of this war with the best type of terms. Now that they saw they were about to lose. But the German army, of course, soldiers didn't see this. They came home, they were unemployed, angry, frustrated. And when you've got a lot of young men standing on street corners with nothing to do, who have all been trained in the art of murder, you're going to have trouble. The German government was a new democracy, something called the Weimar Republic. It's pronounced like Weimar, but it's spelled with a W, W-E-I-M-A-R. The Weimar was distrusted by most Germans. They didn't understand it. And the Weimar was struggling to gain some kind of recognition, authority. And they certainly saw all these unemployed soldiers as being a real issue, a real problem. So they started to hire veterans to spy on these veterans. Now, veterans after a war usually seek other veterans to speak to. They're the only ones who can really understand what they've gone through. And veterans in all countries and all over the world, they join veterans clubs where they can get together and they can talk and they can share and mostly bitch and moan about the government and how they've been wronged. And certainly many German soldiers joined veterans clubs all over Germany. Most of them were simply small groups of veterans who would get together behind a pub on a Saturday evening, drink, and try to share, try to get through the pain that they were going through. One of these groups in Munich was a group later called the National Socialists, what we will know as the Nazis. And Adolf Hitler was originally hired by the German government, the Weimar, to be a spy on this group. He joined it. He sat in on meetings. He even wrote reports. We have the copies of the reports back to the Weimar saying this is what's going on. I don't think there are problems, so forth and so on. But as he began to go to these meetings, at first he was very quiet. But very quickly he began to speak up. And as he spoke up, he became aware of a skill, of a talent that he did not know about. And that talent was that he was a hell of a public speaker. Adolf Hitler could keep people transfixed for hours. And later on, when he becomes leader of Germany, he will give speeches that last hours to 40,000 people, and they will stay transfixed in their seats and extremely excited right to the last minute. He began to speak. He spoke about things at first that were things that German veterans would relate to. He said that we didn't lose the war. We were stabbed in the back. Industrialists who got us into the war looking for profits, when they saw that profits were in danger, they got us. They left us, and they controlled the government, and we left the war in order to save their profits. He said in particular it was Jewish industrialists. Now, going after the Jews was not a Hitler thing. Hitler went after them, but anti-Semitism had been around for a very long time in Europe, in 2,000 years. The anti-Jewish movement was really something that was kind of a go-to. When people were angry, upset, it was often that the Jews they blamed for their social problems. So him saying that the Jews were the cause of this was something that many Germans would accept. I mean, they understood. They already believed. He said that Germany was a great nation, that we've been cheated, and that we will rise up and we will get revenge, and we will get rid of the poisons in our society. Amongst these poisons were Jews and gypsies and anyone he felt that didn't fit into what he considered to be his ideal vision of the German nation. Very quickly, he went from being a spy for the government to being the leader of the National Socialists. In 1923, Hitler attempted to overthrow the government of Munich, the city government of Munich, and therefore try to control Bavaria, not all the German nation, just that specific area in 1923. And he failed. He was arrested, he was sent to prison. While in prison, he put together his ideas for a book called Mein Kampf, M-I-N-K-A-M-P-F, Mein Kampf, which means my struggle and my battle. In Mein Kampf, if anybody in 1923 had really taken Hitler seriously and said, we really got to see what this guy's going to do, all they had to do was read Mein Kampf, because in Mein Kampf he tells exactly what he intends on doing and why he intends on doing it. In Mein Kampf he explains, we will get a revenge against the ancient enemy, and that is France. But in Mein Kampf, besides saying the Jews and gypsies and other groups have to be eliminated from our society, they are poison, what you really see is his focus is really on the East. What Hitler wants, and it really explains a lot of his moves in the future, later on in the war, what Hitler wants is he wants Germany to conquer Eastern Europe and conquer Russia. He called these people, the East Europeans, the Slavs and the Russians and others, dogs. He called them subhuman. That the German empire would conquer all of this land, and these people would become the slave labor for an empire that would last 1,000 years, the Third Reich. He made reference to England, but Hitler had a kind of an idea, this idea he had in his head, that the English and the Germans were cousins. He went back to old Anglo-Saxon days. The Anglo-Saxons had invaded England in the 5th century. 2 German tribes invaded England in the 5th century AD, and he said, well, we are related. He believed he could work something out. He believed America was too decadent to really fight any kind of serious war. He felt America was too caught up in their, in their wealth and in their toys and cars to really be a serious threat to German expansion.